Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Hi everybody, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive. This is episode 51, which is partly with me on the road returning from Mammoth, and a few updates thrown in since then. Also, we have the long-anticipated review of Sierra Cottons and Wools up in Bishop, California, whose name I have made practically a religion out of mangling every time, so I'm going to try and interject a correction, but I want you to make sure to hear it correctly right here and right now. Also, in the warm thanks department, I wanted to shout a big heads up and thank you to Chris H., or H if you're British. Thank you for hanging along for the ride for so long. Thank you for the delicious coffee. And I sure hope that you and I are biking together in our own respective corners of the universe. Thank you. I really appreciate your generosity and your hanging in with the podcast. So now we're going to get on with episode 51. I do also want to point out, I did finish the Frankensocks. I'm going to say that slowly. I can't remember when. I believe I finished them sitting in the coffee house in Mammoth. But when I was recording episode 51, I was a little on the frantic side because everything happened very precipitately on Sunday night when I realized there was going to be a snowstorm that night. So off we go back to the exciting stories of Mammoth with interjections by yours truly. Hi, it's Dr. Gemma, and I'm thinking this is episode 51 of Cognitive. I'm still traveling. I'm on my way home from a really eventful Mammoth weekend. And I kind of wanted to let you know how everything worked out. And I want to put up front for what I think are new listeners. I hope, it's okay. We'll see. But at any rate, I want to put up front that I'm doing a yarn store review, an unexpected delight in the middle of my trip, which I may have mentioned. I have not listened to the recordings I made as I was heading northward, so I might have mentioned them. But I want to really do a comprehensive yarn store review because it was a very, very good yarn store. So, if you're traveling, you know how desperate we all are, right, for a good brick and mortar LYS. Well, I actually found one, so this is kind of the happy news. But let me get on to episode 51 because I made a lot of promises in the last recordings amidst my ramblings of all the things I was going to get done on this trip. And it's really been an interesting trip. As I record this, it is Monday, and I think it's the 18th of October. I am speeding through a small town called Olancha at 63 miles an hour, and a guy is cutting me off even in the middle of nowhere on a 2-lane highway in the Owens Valley where, there's such a low population, but I can still get cut off. And we get another Death Valley left turn. I just love this road. I'm on the 395. I'm heading southbound. This is now the 4th time I've done it. That is once up to Yosemite, there and back. That was 2 times. And then this time up to Mammoth, there and back. And also partially by going up to Death Valley, although we usually dogleg off to the right and go through Ridgecrest and Panamint if you're looking at this on a map. But I just love this region. Now, Trona, if you're going over Death Valley, no, kind of scary because the town, well, I know too much about the town. I know some of the people living there and maybe not, but all joking aside, this is a fascinating area of America and a lot of people just never will see it. Well, and by the way, there are a huge amount of places in America that most of us won't see. So nothing that special here, but it's a very unique and wonderful landscape. I'm rambling on. Let's get on to what's on my hooks and needles, and then I'm going to tell you all sorts of exciting things about Mammoth. So I had made a lot of plans on this trip for the knitting I could get done. As it turned out, I did pretty well, and I did pretty badly. But it's one of those serendipitous situations. Everything worked out really, really well. So, first of all, I didn't touch Twin Faces vest. It's with me, but we never got that far. But I'm really pretty happy about how far I did get, because I took the Franken sock, which of course is my Halloween sock, made up of stripes of my leftover yarn, and then feet and heels made out of the biggest hunk of leftover yarn that I really wanted to use up, because it's good yarn, and yet color, I didn't really want to make entire socks out of it. I'd made mitts out of it, a part of it, last year. Okay. So the Franken socks, and if you want to hear the recipe, it's in previous episodes. You can look at the show notes. The Franken socks, I did not finish the second sock, but boy did I book on it. I am observing my 9 to 9 screen limit, which I'll probably talk about again later in this episode. And as a result, I wake up in the morning and I now have like 90 minutes to 2 to 3 hours sometimes of open time before I pick up a screen at 9 a.m. or turn on a screen. There may be exceptions. This morning I did all my texts to my patients before I got on the road, advising them that I'd be seeing them tomorrow. I normally send reminders to my patients. So, there are times where I'll do it for the sake of necessity. But nonetheless, using the 9 to 9 screen rule, that I can use my screens 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., has been really, really good for me. And so I woke up, and, in Mammoth as well. And I was like, what do I do now? And the answer is I made myself a cup of coffee. I took a rather slow, comfortable hot shower. I did my daily grooming routines. And then I just sat around and knitted. And I realized this is good because it's also providing me more time to do my morning warm-up routine, which I'd gotten out of the habit of doing when I got sick with COVID in 2020. And so hopefully I'll be talking about that in later episodes. But it is amazing because I now have time in the morning. And also I was on vacation, and there were breaks where I had to kind of rest and catch up. And I was knitting. I was carrying my sock knitting project bag with me, as one does when one knits socks. And it's a little tiny, easy thing to carry, as opposed to the great honking bag I was hauling around when I was knitting the Mammoth Mad Skills sweater. So, anyway, let me think. I'm up to the toe decreases, and then I will go and do the heel. So that's probably 2 more evenings, and I will be done the sock. And meanwhile, I took with me the beautiful wild lettuce shawl, and realized, yes, I was playing yarn chicken with it, and yes, I was about to lose. So I've got 4 repeats to go, which is eerie because every time I do a repeat of the lace edging, which is only 25 stitches deep by 12 rows per repeat, but every time I do one of those babies, I count the stitches remaining and I have 48 stitches. So really, who knows how much I actually have left? But I was using a beautiful yarn in merino cashmere nylon, an MCN, by Fiber Files, who's now calling herself Sterling Ridge and is not dying currently, but was making masks when last I checked and selling those. And she did fabulous dye job and wonderful. One of the things I loved about Sterling Ridge, alias Fiber Files, she could do a semi-solid like nobody else I've ever met, with the possible exception of Lisa Souza, because Lisa Souza's got some, I gotta admit, Poly, I think it's called Raven's Wing, and Squash Blossom are also remarkable. Yeah, Lisa Souza would be, Lisa Souza and Fiber Files, alias Sterling Ridge, do these insanely good semi-solids. So the whole goal of the wild lettuce shawl was I looked at this skein, said it's a little bit low yardage. I really want to get rid of it. I thought I picked a low yardage pattern, and I'm going to come back to that because I'm not taking a cheap shot at the designer because she's magnificent. And now what happened was I lost by about 3.5 repeats would be my guess. That I was doing a repeat probably yesterday. I've had such a weird weekend, but I'll come back to that, I hope. But anyway, I was doing a repeat and then just looked at what I had left and said, oh my gosh, I may not get through the next repeat. Fortunately, Lisa Souza, as she so often does, LisaKnit.com, came to the rescue. That last week, because she couldn't go to Rhinebeck, I've never been to Rhinebeck. You know, it's kind of like meeting Santa Claus. You know it's possible, but you know it's not all that likely. Or maybe it's not. You don't really know, do you? At any rate, she didn't get to go to Rhinebeck, so she had a sale, no shipping cost, which usually, if you do the math, represents about a 10% off for a single skein. Anyway, I had wanted to experiment with a few of her colorways, so, you know, this was the moment. Now, as I said last episode, I think Lisa Souza does not have sales so much as Lisa Souza is a sale. She does have sales, by the way. But the point is she charges so little compared to everybody else, and her dyeing is spectacular. Again, in terms of overall dyeing of everything, the only person who comes close to her is Elf over at Redfish Dye Works. I don't know if Redfish is still going. I haven't checked in a while. But again, I think Lisa and Elf are just awesome all around. They can do anything. They can basically look at the color wheel, go, I want that, and make it happen. They're so professional. Anyway, so I blather on because I adore Lisa and Rod, her husband. They're just the nicest people, but also they're just really darn good at what they do. And I mean, there are a lot of good dyers out there, but I mean, all-arounders, it would be, like I said, Lisa and Elf. So I wanted to experiment, so I ended up getting an MCN from Lisa in a dark blue, and I can't remember the name. I ordered it, and I think I say this in 51, I ordered another DK from her because I wanted to see how two of her DKs work together in color, and if they don't, that's okay. The world needs more hats. But anyway, so now I realized I have to stop on the wild lettuce and wait for Lisa's yarn to arrive, which should be pretty much any minute now. Because the other great thing about Lisa is when you order something online from her, you get it right away. I mean, she puts it in the mail the day she gets it. She's really remarkably fast on the turnaround. Okay, so that was very happy. So, yeah, the wild lettuce will get finished. Yeah, it looks terrific. I'm really looking forward to blocking it, which is not something you hear me say very often. So, hopefully, I'll wind that down. I had hoped to finish it this weekend and be wearing it around Mammoth, but, you know, I hoped the Easter Bunny would bring me chocolate eggs, but number one, I'm diabetic, and number two, she didn't. All right. So that's that's a wild lettuce, that's the socks, that's Twin Faces vest. The temperature blanket is waiting for its injection of fresh yarn, which hopefully will be coming in a few days. So basically the temperature blanket's on hold, the wild lettuce is on hold. This means I'm finishing the sock in the next day or two, and then I'm going to go full bore, I hope, on Twin Faces vest. What else? So I think that's about it for my needles and spindles. Sorry, I'm a little distracted because I had a little bit of a cup distraction there, but that went off well, happily. And in case you're wondering, now I'm slowly moving over towards the Mojave Desert. I'm kind of coming out of the Owens Valley, and I'm watching the beautiful transition to the very, very northwest corner of the Mojave Desert. Oh, it's so pretty. And the road just winds up and goes through this gap in the mountains. And the mountains that divide us from Nevada are very slowly sinking lower and lower and merging with the mountains on my right, which are the Sierra Nevada. And I have no idea which county, if I'm still in Inyo County. Anyway, very, very beautiful place. This is one of those amazing landscapes you just can't get over. And it feels so special to see it again. Where am I? All right, so no spinning, obviously. Strategy. Well, because I'm away from my notes, I'm talking a bit about Stoicism. So I've been working on the journal in the morning, journal in the evening strategy in my screen-free time, and I find that remarkably soothing at night as well. So my mornings and my evenings have turned into get up, make coffee, take a shower, dress, do the little freshen up things around the house as well as on myself, feed the dogs and all that, make sure the animals are fed, throw in the day's work. So if we're doing laundry, I throw in laundry, whatever. And then I settle down with my coffee and I sort of write down my goals for the day. I've really been enjoying that. That's been extremely helpful. And I want to talk a little bit about journaling today as a result. Journaling is one of these amazing skills of the literate that I was trained to teach clients to journal, patients now that I'm a doctor. And the interesting thing is my first job after grad school and after my internship was with basically patients who were not literate enough to journal, kids and some adults. And it was very disturbing because I had journaled all my life at that point, and I always found it helpful. And it's an amazing spur to creativity, and I do believe humans need to create. And so when you look at depression and anxiety, and you look at the fact that Americans are kind of anti-literacy, which is hard on me as a former college professor, but also I've lived in other countries, and I've seen people desperate for literacy. I remember I went to Hungary when there was still an Iron Curtain and still communist governments, and there was huge censorship. And when I went to Hungary, they had released for the first time the British novel from the 19th century, Jane Eyre. And it was unbelievable, the surge of excitement this caused among the common people. They were so grateful to get access to what is basically a classic British novel, not particularly about modern politics, that when I was in Hungary, they had just released it the day I got there. Everybody on the subway was reading it. I just remember that, seeing it on the subway and seeing everybody had copies. Old people, young people, men, women, children, unbelievable. And literacy is such an astonishing gift that way. It gives us comfort when we read, but also the separate skill of writing. I say this because I was a Shakespeare scholar, and yes, in Shakespeare's time, pretty much everybody was taught to read except very poor migrant laborers. However, not everybody was taught to write. So writing is also one of these overlooked privileges in our culture. Turns out that using your hand to write soothes humans. And we really, really disregard that a lot. But we do not get the same satisfaction or comfort from typing as we get from manually writing. So, there was this whole debate a while back about, do we teach kids to print? Do we teach them to write longhand script? I don't actually care. Writing in a script is actually a time saver compared to printing. That's why humans developed it. It's easier to just connect the letters and never raise your pen or pencil from the paper surface. But I do think the ability to write as opposed to type is a skill that I hope to heaven we never lose, because it's terrifically important and it's very soothing to humans. So journaling is emotionally soothing just by the act of writing. And there's been a trend recently towards, I think they call them bullet journals, where you just do bullet points because people feel too pressured to sit and describe their day or their feelings. And again, I understand it. I find it a little sad, although I do resort to it myself. Because if you look at the most enjoyable novels people read, a significant percentage are written in the first person, and they really are like reading somebody's private journal of their emotions and their responses. And even things like detective novels can work that way. And even a third-person novel or a second-person novel can work that way. You remember the difference, right? A first-person novel is you just have one person saying I, and everything's from their point of view. And much of the literary value comes out of how their ignorance as well as their knowledge is playing for and against them. A second-person novel, of course, is when it's like the Harry Potter novels where you have Harry's perspective on everything, but it's not written in the first person, I. It's more like Harry said, Harry thought. And a third-person novel is where you know everybody's thoughts. Okay, if I remember that correctly, I'm sure someone will correct me in the show notes. Which reminds me to say the show notes are at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. You can also respond there or on our group on Ravelry. At any rate. Okay, so journaling is really good for people. Writing down your thoughts, taking the time to do it is really good. But also just trying to sit down like the Stoics did and think one or two important thoughts about your life and write it down, one observation. I'm thinking of Marcus Aurelius starting his meditations by having one entry that is simply, wow, the guy who raised me taught me to be virtuous and thrifty. And that's all he writes. I mean, really short entry. But that kind of thing where you just sort of take one thought and reflect on it and note it down can be very good. What I'm doing as a Stoic right now is I'm actually trying to write down my goals for the day. And I'm also looking at them in terms of the Stoic virtues and writing which ones I think this goal is looking at. So wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. It is disturbing that so many of my goals are about self-control. I always think of myself as a very emotionally disciplined person. And one of the real revelations is, not as much as I thought. But I want to recommend journaling to you as a way of setting up your day and then as a way of reviewing your day in a very conscious way, not just letting your time slip away. I will tell you it is strange in two respects. One is that I'm 61. And I was surprised how I kept saying, I don't really have much life left, so I don't know why I would bother journal. Who's ever going to read these? Who's going to care? And that's a very depressive thought, isn't it? You know? I mean, really quite surprisingly downer. I'm not usually that much of a downer. And journaling has really brought back to me something I learned from my son when he was very young, which is every single day of my life is equally important to every other single day. That when I was young, my parents had grown up in this very, very hard-scrabble world where both their families were fighting just to get enough to eat. And so their values were formulated from that. They were loving parents, and they did their best. But they did tend to look at adults as the most important people because they were self-providers. And that, I mean, for loving parents, that really did color their view of the world, that kids' lives were not as significant as adults because kids were on a very material level, not contributing as much. And it's odd because, my father used to talk about how rare and precious our childhoods were and how he loved our innocence. I mean, it's not like he was cold-hearted or mean, but you could just tell. He grew up in a world where being able to provide for yourself was huge. And so one of the lessons I learned in motherhood was that my son did not have to provide. Doesn't that sound weird? But when he was an infant, he was as valuable as I was. I remember waking up the morning after he was born and the nurse brought him in and I was holding him and I suddenly understood that. And I understood that because I was aware that if he died, I would die. That I was experiencing the first burst of maternal love, which is a force beyond all compare in my experience. And I realized for the first time how every minute of your life is important, no matter what your age. And you want to give everybody as much quality of life as you can, no matter what their age, no matter what their situation. And I realized that, again, I'm looking at myself as I age and saying, am I really doing that with myself? And journaling has really, really brought that back to me. The other thing that's really wonderful about it is looking back. I mean, I haven't been journaling that long recently. I just started up again in late July. But it's strange because I can look back and already these are very alien thoughts. This is a part of my life I'd already consigned to the ash heap of lost memory. And I'm really, really enjoying reading my own journal. That's partly because in my youth, my journal was the place where I secretly whispered all my nasty thoughts because I was so repressed. Yeah, I do a lot better now. I mean, you have to be careful with journaling. If it turns into your hate Bible, maybe not such a good idea. And again, we do know there's research, although it comes from a surprising source. If you're angry and someone gives you a padded baton and says, here, use this and beat these pillows to get your anger out of you, 50% of people actually do lose their anger. The other 50% get more angry. I find that writing a hate Bible is very much the same. If you're writing angry thoughts, I get more angry. So that was one of my early mistakes in journaling. So let me respectfully suggest that you not do that, okay? Okay. So that's journaling, and that's going to be my strategy. And what else? Oh yeah, I'm going back to those lectures on screen addiction where Dr. Alder, these are the lectures on the Calm app, where he talks about boredom actually enhances creativity. And we know from all sorts of research that when people are bored is when they begin to have unique ideas and to create and to design ideas that fulfill or meet human needs. So again, you want to be bored, you want to cultivate boredom, you don't want to just replace it with a screen. Journaling and trying to consciously direct your life is a great solution. What else? Well, let's see. Put a lid on it. Obviously, I was not cooking this week. I was in Mammoth. I have to tell you, Mammoth Lakes is a downer where restaurants are concerned. I had basically 2 restaurant meals. One was Jimmy's Taverna, which was mediocre Greek. The presentations, however, were beautiful. The way it was displayed on the plate, but I was not really that impressed with the quality of the food. Now, of course, I'm eating keto, and I went in and I ordered 3 dips that were relatively keto, and the olive dip was so heavily salted I could barely eat it. It did come with warm pita bread, and that looked fresh baked, but no bread for me, kids. You know. The other 2 dips were okay, without being anything special. The tzatziki I've had better, and I can't think. I had a very cheesy, nice dip, cold dip, can't remember what it was. So I wasn't terribly impressed by that. You do have to remember we're in Mammoth, so I'm not sure what their grocery suppliers are like, in all fairness to Jimmy's Taverna. Then I had a scallop appetizer, which was a warm wilted salad. That was quite nice, with a balsamic, I think, reduction dressing. I don't know, the salad was quite nice. The scallops came with it, 4 little scallops, beautiful sauces drizzled on the plate, including a tomato and I think a reduced balsamic. But, you know, again, nothing all that amazing. Prices were okay. The service was not good. I was immediately judged when I walked in alone without a reservation as not a spender. And then when it turned out I can't drink, it was like, oh, what are you doing here? So, well, you know, eating dinner late on a Saturday night. And I really felt the wine steward came out and did try to do something nice for me, like, let's get rid of this plate. And I said, okay, can we get rid of this one too? No, you should finish that. And I'm like, you know, I really don't like you people. I don't like you people at all. My server basically refused to wait on me after I ordered. I think his attitude was, yeah, you're not spending much. You're not going to leave a good tip. It was discouraging. It was discouraging. I watched the staff fawning on people who were spending a lot and were beautifully coiffed and were drinking wine and making many selections from the wine menu. It was discouraging. They don't want me, I guess, and I don't want you to go see them unless you're into that kind of thing. I mean, if I were a serious wine drinker, I might really quite like this place. They seem to cultivate a wine cellar. But again, since, what is it, like 60% of the American population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic, and depending who you ask, I could be either one. I was discouraged. On the other hand, I went to the Good Life Cafe after I went hiking Sunday morning. They were superb. It was just a really homey, friendly cafe. They had a great breakfast menu. They had a keto entree, which was half an avocado, a large amount of bacon or sausage. I opted bacon. It was beautifully prepared. and 2 eggs any way you wanted them. I had 2 poached. They actually asked me how hard I wanted my eggs poached. Wow, bonus points. You don't get that question very often. Americans don't eat poached eggs. The Brits do. And in Britain, I used to eat them all the time, and I'm kind of pleased to find Americans who actually realize there's a difference in how you serve a poached egg. So I really like Good Life Cafe. I would have gone back for dinner because I was just about giving up on every other restaurant in terms of keto. Several sushi bars, not good on sashimi. Sushi was probably fine. They were very well rated in Yelp, but again, can't eat that. So no big negatives here. Just hard to get a keto meal in quite the way I wanted it. However, they were aware of keto. I was surprised. A few places on this trip were talking keto, so that was nice. So I guess that's all I can give you to put a lid on it. I did go to a grocery store while there and got packaged salami and packaged cheeses, none of which I really ate because I was doing many other things, as I shall tell you. The other great discovery in Mammoth was the Black Velvet Coffee Company. I really liked them. I went in there because the Starbucks, which is never particularly a great coffee experience, it's okay, but the Starbucks was awful in Mammoth. The people were overworked and very frustrated. I don't think there was a restroom in the big Starbucks in the main tourist part of town. I guess they were tired of us all making them clean it over and over. I just finally said, I don't know why I'm bothering. There's probably 5 other good coffee houses in this very touristy town. So I went into Black Velvet and I was rewarded. The barista was in there all by herself. They apparently served Belgian waffles. They had some nice local bakery cookies. I obviously didn't bother, but I went in and I told her I'm diabetic, I can't have sugar, and we negotiated a chai tea latte with loose leaf tea that was excellent, and I was happy to tip heavily because she was great. And I sat there and enjoyed 2 cups of the chai tea latte before I realized a blizzard was moving in on us, or what I would call it. So that kind of took care of that. I'm passing a ghost town. It says Golden Cac. I assume that's cactus. Anyway, it's interesting. It just looks like you can it's a free thing. You just wander through it. No thanks, but kind of interesting idea. So let's put a lid on it. Ah, yes. Oh, shoot. Well, obviously I didn't go rock climbing so far this weekend, but you go to Mammoth to hike and to see the colors at this time of year. I saw some colors, but I was actually in the higher country, so I didn't see a lot. But boy, was I rewarded. I went hiking. Mammoth online has a wonderful, glorious map of hiking trails with an enormous amount of detail. On top of that, if you have the All Trails app, and I do, yay, Kern County, you can get a lot of their trails with ratings on All Trails as well. I relied solely on the Mammoth map, which is unusual for me. I like All Trails quite a lot. And I decided to do the town loop. This went a little against my instincts because it seemed too easy. Well, as it turned out, it was a great idea for a number of reasons. But I realized I was only going to have 2 days in Mammoth, and I wanted to see the town as much as I wanted to see the wild areas. So fortunately, I looked at the map and decided I started outside the Starbucks. So I was on the map, it looks like it's the north edge of town. I'm not sure if that's absolutely true. I'm not sure about my directions in Mammoth. But anyway, it's the top of the map. And I headed, assuming that's north, I headed east. And I'm so glad because that's the wilderness part of the town loop. And it took me around an RV park, but it took me out into the wildlands. And there was a pleasing amount of small wildlife flitting around and birds. And the views of the local mountains were spectacular, including I finally located Mammoth Rock, which everybody talks about, and yet I found it curiously hard to locate on a map, but I found myself looking right down its nose. So that was good. Got to see Mammoth Rock. And went out and hiked around and came out to what I think is called Sherwin's Vista. And that was spectacular. It gave me this wonderful view towards what's called the Long Valley. And at this point, I would think I was looking east-southeast. So I'm not sure what the Long Valley was. I'm sorry to have so few details, but it's just this long, deep gorge with water at the bottom in various locations, and it was spectacular. And then I was arcing around towards the south part of the map and realized that something strange was going on. At first, I was getting unusually tired. Later, because I think I was at about 8,000 feet to 9,000 feet, I think 8,000 feet in altitude, and I really wasn't thinking about the fact that I live at 4,000 feet and this would make a difference. But it was fun. Anyway, I just had to take more of my time. There were benches all over the place, paved asphalt trail. I thought, really fun trail to come back on a bike. Yes, they have bike and e-bike rentals in town. Yes, I think the trails are e-bike friendly. Or they certainly let you know when they are. Anyway, that was weird thing number one. Weird thing number two. I went out on the trail and I was wearing only the beautiful Mammoth Mad Skills sweater. And when I got out, I thought, no, my hands are cold. And I thought, well, it's a good thing I have my fingerless mitts that I made last year with me. So I put those on, so that was nice. So I'm out walking, I'm getting warmer and warmer, and the weather's supposed to go up to 55, so I'm thinking, yeah, that makes sense. I'm probably going to be really hot in my sweater. Well, no. In fact, the longer I was out, the colder I was getting, and I thought, now that's a little bit weird, but I wasn't focused on the temperature too much. Anyway, I started at 9:45 in the morning. By about 11, I was like, I'm getting cold. That shouldn't be happening. I'm hiking. I'm sweating inside my sweater and my turtleneck. Why am I getting cold? And so I sort of shrugged it off, and I turned back north, midway across the southern arc of the trail, and I went on the college trail cutoff, or whatever they're calling it, college trail connector, and then I got myself up to the roads of town, and I walked up the road towards the Good Life Cafe, which is where I decided to get lunch, and it was just a little past 11. So I did 3 miles. And I go to the Good Life, and I had a wonderful, wonderful meal, as I said, served by the friendly and gregarious Oscar. Thank you, wonderful guy. And after my early lunch, I walked out, and I was cold. In fact, I was like, where's my hat? And then realized I had one in the car, but I wasn't far from Starbucks. So I walked over to the Starbucks where my car was parked, and I got in, found my hat, and that's about where it hit me. This is odd. It's supposed to go up to 55, and I'm getting colder, not warmer, and I had my gloves on again, my fingerless mitts. So that was a very odd experience. But that was all shoot that I did climb last Monday, I think. No, I climbed last Thursday, sorry. I would have reported on the last Monday in episode 49, I think. But I did climb last Thursday morning. I did a quick half hour, and they did indeed take down my favorite 5.6 trail. But I topped out on the other 5.6, and I'm just trying to get myself used to that idea that I can climb that without anxiety. My anxiety about heights is very real, which surprises me. I really thought this would kick it. But I'm doing it. I'm climbing 30 feet in the air, just holding on by my fingertips with a belaying rope at my hips. And I'm enjoying it, so, it is what it is. But I'm working on that particular challenge. And then, of course, I did 3 miles in a surprisingly high wind and cold day in Mammoth. And I am really, really, really glad that I did, let me tell you. Now I'm on the home stretch in the Mojave region. I'm still quite a ways away from where I need to be on the 58. Where was I? So that was all shoot. Something I really like. Oh, I can do that yarn store review right here. Sierra Cottons and Wools. Link in the show notes. So, I'm driving north Saturday, and I thought, hey, you know what I'm not thinking of that's really logical? There's going to be a yarn store up here somewhere. I realized suddenly that all this whole area gets cold winters and snow, and they have to wear woolen clothing. And I thought, surely somebody up here has knitting supplies. And then I remembered my days living in Pullman, Washington, where quilting was basically every woman's winter skill, because there was nothing to do in Pullman in the winter. The men watched football on weekends, and we all cross-country skied on the golf course, but there really wasn't a lot to do. And so one of the things that all the women did was they were crafty. And a really popular craft, of course, was quilting. So I thought, between these two things, surely this is what they're doing in these small towns going up the Owens Valley northward towards Mammoth and Yosemite. So fortunately, I just yelped. And I didn't even yelp. What did I do? I went to the Maps application on my phone first. I have an iPhone. So I went to Maps, and I just focused on Bishop. And then I said, knitting stores near Bishop. So I came up with Sierra, and I'm so happy that I did. Because I got up to Bishop. Now, if you're going up to Yosemite or Mammoth, Bishop is a really natural stopping place. If you're really driving hard and you're not used to long drives, Bishop is a reasonable place to spend the night, although I usually push through. Well, both times I've tried, I've pushed through to the more northern areas. When you get to Bishop, it's pretty low altitude relative to where you're going from there on. And so it's a nice place to sort of stop, take a rest, and check the weather in front of you. So anyway, I stopped in Bishop, and I found Sierra Cottons and Woolens, and I was so happy. This is a really amazing store. I had the chance to talk to the owner, and I regret that I didn't catch her name. She's quite a gifted artist, and she's doing her own embroidery designs and marketing them. I mean, she's really good. She's published 2 books with a smaller craft publisher, which is 2 more books than I've ever done, kids. And she's working on a new book on embroidered hand towels. And she's selling her patterns and she's selling kits. And so I said, what do you want knitters to know about your store? And I think she was a little taken aback because I don't think she sees knitting as her main skill, but she certainly respects it and knows a lot about it. Recognized the sweater I was wearing right away as a Malabrigo Rios and the colorway. I mean, she's not fooling around. I just don't think her heart is as much in knitting as my heart is, okay? So I said, well, what would you want knitters to know? And she said, well, you know, we have a good selection of various yarns, which indeed she did. In a very small storefront, she had an outrageously good selection of very price-conscious, usable yarns. And she was doing a good job on the pricing because I have to admit, I would worry about keeping any LYS in business through these times. And yet her prices were very, very reasonable. She had a good selection of Malabrigo Rios, and to my surprise, because a lot of yarn shops aren't doing this anymore, she had sweater quantities. And she was very clear that, yeah, she would run out, but she would order it for you right up front. So she said, you know, I'd like people to know I have a good variety of yarns. We know a lot about knitting here, that we can help you make your selection. And at the same time, she was great to talk to because I said, so what's it like being out in the back of Beyond with a craft store? And she said, well, you know, it's the typical LYS challenge that we don't sell patterns anymore because really there's Ravelry. So that takes away a need for the shelf space for pattern books. But she said, you know, you can't stock everything, that it's hard. Now, what was amazing to me was how incredibly well stocked this store is. And I don't just mean knitting. I mean, she really had she'd gotten a lot in there. It was beautiful. The displays were beautiful. There was no sense of it being cramped or dirty or cluttered. It's a beautiful shop with an absolutely elegant layout, but she gets a lot in there. So she had a nice yarn selection I found basically, I remember finding DK and bulky, super bulky, and worsted weight. She had good makes in there. She would order anything for you. By the way, her presence on the internet is beautiful. And what she really did that I thought was just brilliant was she figured out who her audience is going to be. And her audience is going to be people passing through who want to souvenir knit. Now, she's also got another audience, and I'll come back to that. I don't want to undersell this. But in terms of knitting, she realized that people want to souvenir knit. So she's carrying a good selection of wooden knitting needles by a small company I didn't recognize, and crochet hooks, and had some clover too. But the point is, if you want hooks or needles, she's got them. If you want tools, she's got them. You know, cable, needles, whatever. She's got them. She did a really good job on that. And she's got a nice variety of yarns, but she's selling kits. I actually bought a Neuro kit from her, which is not something I would normally do, but she had the beautiful kits that Neuro made where it's hearts and it's basically plain scarves with a heart at either end in intarsia, or a big blanket with hearts all over it. And these are beautiful, beautiful kits. And I went in there thinking I'm going to buy some souvenir yarn and probably make myself a hat, and realized I forgot my crochet hooks, which is how I would have made myself a hat. I'm not a wooden needle fan, but I had so many steel needles with me. But the point was, I was really impressed. Like, she figured it out, that people come in, they want souvenir yarn. So yeah, she had sock yarn. But as she put it, I stocked the hat yarns. And she did. She has these super bulkies with the needles. You could buy the beautiful wooden needles. And you could make yourself a hat in one night, either hooking it or knitting it with these super bulkies, and you'd be fit for Mammoth or Yosemite or June Lake or wherever. And she also had smaller needles and she had smaller yarns, however you wanted to do it. Now, my idea about souvenir knitting has always been socks, and she really, really impressed me because she changed my mind. She was like, no, really, hats. And I thought, yeah, that's, and my friend Carla, Quantum Quadrat's always saying that too, that her go-to fast projects are hats. Mine are usually socks. And not much sense, really, when you think about it. The hat fans are right. So, okay, so that was her knitting and crocheting audience. There was some fiber. I didn't ask her about it. I believe it was plain, and I don't know if she was keeping that for knitting on huge sticks or if she was actually thinking of spinning, but bully for her. Bully for her. Both those things are in vogue, so I don't know, and I should have asked her. Meanwhile, she had a really, really good quilting section. She had beautiful fabrics. She had the beautiful kits for squares that she had made up. She had a very impressive Halloween display of quilting squares and little quilted projects and little hand-embroidered projects. And then there was the linen. She has returned from a difficult period in her life and is doing a lot of hand embroidery. And she's stocking gorgeous linen, gorgeous. And she says, well, it's not selling. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Now, I learned to embroider. I taught myself in high school. And I embroidered freehand through college on my clothing. And when I went to Scotland, I did a lot of cross-stitch back in the 80s when it was very in vogue. But I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, and they got linen like Bear has aspirin. And so I learned to use really high-quality, high-thread count linens in my embroidery, both cross-stitch and freehand, and crewel, which is embroidery with wool. Oh my gosh. She had these big rolls, and I really regret this. I was kind of not doing well this morning. I really regret this because I wish I had gone in and bought some of this beautiful taupe linen from her, because it would be perfect for the Collie embroidery project, which I did make other progress on. She had a beautiful selection of hand-dyed embroidery yarns and floss. What a good selection. She also had crewel wool from the same indie dyer. The flosses were exactly what I wanted them to be, and were very beautiful. So I was really happy with that. She also had crewel yarn, that is embroidery yarn, from them as well, and those were even more beautiful. So I have to say, I ended up buying a lot of floss from her. I also found she had a good selection of just good old DMC, a buck a skein. And I bought a bunch of DMCs to mix with the hand-dyed ones to get the colors I want, because I embroider usually with two strands held together. And so a lot of times you mix and match your floss colors and you get some really awesome outcomes. So I bought a lot of that. So this is Sierra Cottons and Woolens. It is on Line Avenue, I believe, in Bishop. Google it, you can find it. She's got a great online presence. And then the absolute icing on the cake, she is designing and making kits with a guy who sells hand towels in even weave. Beautiful hand towels is what I'm saying. And she's making kits where she has her own designs to embroider on the hand towels freehand. And they come with rickrack to put at the edge of the hand towel. So you sew that on. That's optional for me, although actually I would probably hand sew it on. I don't know, I'm doing that the hard way. You could do that in 30 seconds on your machine. But she has these beautiful kits with rickrack for the edges, beautifully woven hand towels in beautiful colors. And then she includes flosses and her own designs. I cannot believe what this woman got into this shop. I cannot believe what a jewel this place is. I am really looking forward to my next trip north because I can't wait to go back and see what else she's got in stock. I realized I spent about $70, and really I feel like I got tremendous bargains, that these were great. I missed my chance to get one of the towels. I'm going to order it online. It had a beautiful design called Farm Girl. It says Farm Girl on it and then has all these vegetables. If you're a canner, me. It's so great. But you really owe it to yourself. I will put the link in the show notes. But you really owe it to yourself. Go look at the website. And for heaven's sake, if you're passing through Bishop, California, do not miss this shop. And she's got very generous hours. They were closed on Sunday, I believe. And I was there Saturday, and I could have gone in this morning, but I left town a little too early due to what I will say in the blather. But something I really like, Sierra Cottons and Woolens, link in the show notes. Really, do yourself a favor. Go look this stuff up. Okay, where am I? I'm on the blather. Well, I think I am. So I went to Mammoth, and it was a really amazing trip. So what happened? Saturday morning I woke up and I was having wild stress. And considering all the changes I've made, including the stoicism and the journaling, I couldn't figure out what was going on. But I also had this weird sense that I've had for about 2 weeks that I must get to Mammoth before the snow, because I don't have chains or snow tires. So I don't know why I had that going on, but it really did. And I'm deeply grateful that I really did. So Saturday, I just had this sense I had to get there soon, that the weather was going to close in. The forecast was great. It was going to be warm Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So I said, cool. So anyway, I ended up taking Saturday off because I woke up, I set up everything to see patients, and I got slammed with a migraine. I haven't had a migraine in years. I mean, probably about 7 or 8 years. I don't know what was going on, but at that point I said, look, I'm not going to function. This isn't fair to my patients. I'm just going to throw in the towel here. So I canceled everybody kind of last minute, but it was okay. No serious stuff, no intakes, nothing like that, thank goodness. Patients were very understanding, and I could barely function. I packed, I unpacked, I packed. I said I'll never get a room. I got a room. Cheap room on top of that, a little place called the Ventura Inn that was perfectly good. And I hopped in the car and off I went. And I have my moments. Now, you remember I use tarot cards as a way, I don't predict the future, guys, but I like to use them as a way of examining my own thinking, that I sort of stop and think when I do a draw, like, what am I connecting to this, and what does it mean I'm really thinking? And the tarot cards were really quite funny because they kept saying, go to Mammoth. And I thought, yeah, I really, again, this isn't anything mystical. I'm not at all psychic. This is just me. I use them as a sort of tool to interpret my own thoughts and feelings, frankly. And sometimes, of course, you know what that means. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what this card is about, but it doesn't relate to anything. But it was funny because, what I could tell from the tarot was I really wanted to go. And I thought, well, I finished the Mad Skills sweater, which I'd been calling the Mammoth sweater at one point because I was so infatuated with this idea. And suddenly there it is. So I put on my beautiful Francis Revisited, which was the perfect travel sweater for this trip. And then I packed the Mad Skills Mammoth sweater. So off I went. I had a great drive up. And again, I remembered the insanely beautiful scenery once you get out of the Mojave and get into the Owens Valley region. The Mojave's beautiful too, but I see it almost every day. And I, of course, went through Red Rock Canyon, and that was insanely beautiful. I mean, it was just a marvelous thing. I'm actually approaching Red Rock as I say this, and the cloud formations are beautiful and amazing over the mountains here. I've been under big sky, the kind of big sky you get in like Montana and eastern Washington, and it's really quite magnificent. I'd sort of forgotten that big sky feeling. But here I am entering the far, far western reaches of the Mojave and admiring it as I come towards Red Rock Canyon. At any rate, so I get up to Mammoth, as I babbled on to you in the last episode, I think, as I record this, and I get there just at sunset. And it was very, very pretty, very peaceful. Not what I expected. I expected it to be a little more built up, and it reminded me a lot of Big Bear, but not quite as ritzy, but nice. And so I got to the Ventura Inn, and that was okay. And, what you notice in Mammoth right away is no parking spaces. I mean, it really feels crowded in that part of town. So anyway, I pulled into the Ventura Inn, got a reasonable room, and set myself up, and it was very quiet, even though the place was very crowded. The hotel was very full. I literally got the last room, apparently, and you could tell. And I got very cozy in my little, I don't know, it's almost a studio, but not quite. It had a little refrigerator, a little microwave, so that was nice. And nice bed, really nice bed, pillow top mattress. So that was really a pleasant surprise. And the room was quite tidy and warm. The only problem, there was about an inch of opening, wide open to the elements, under the door. So I took my towels and I stuffed them in it to stop cold air from coming in, which was good because it got down to 19 degrees on Saturday night. Meanwhile, I had brought my own big bath sheet, as I do. When I travel, I now carry my own soaps and my own bath sheet. And that has made a big difference. I also, thank goodness, brought a queen-size Sherpa-style blanket, like a big, soft, warm, furry blanket. That thing is hard to slog up and down steps with, but I was very grateful to have it on my bed. And I could have heated the room to compensate for that. The heater in the room worked either full bore or but I turned the heat off and slept under the Sherpa blanket and had my big bath sheet and had my towel stuffed under the door, and it worked really nicely. Really, really nicely. And so I was quite cozy in my room, and I woke up the next morning and realized it was cold. It was really cold. It was like 20 degrees. And so I actually had been sleeping comfortably in just a t-shirt, but I put on my warm winter PJs, and then I laid in bed and made coffee in the little coffee maker, which was okay. Not great, but I had bought cream the night before, heavy cream, and so I had a nice cup of coffee, and I had a keto yogurt, which I also bought at the local grocery store, and it was called keto, which surprised me. And then I laid in bed and I journaled, and I read and I knitted, and oh God, it was so nice. So I pulled myself together and said, okay, I'm going off to Starbucks. Got to the worst Starbucks I've ever been to in terms of service, but I really can't blame them. They must be so overwhelmed there. And realized that you don't go to Starbucks in Mammoth Lakes. You go to the other coffee houses. But I was there, and I actually started the Town Loop Trail hike there and did 3 miles and ended up, as I've said, at Good Life Cafe. And from there, I thought, what do I do? So I thought, I'm going to look at any craft stores here, which there didn't seem to be. Well, I went to a place called Bookie Joint. It's a local bookstore. And as the owners grew their own family, it's become more. So it's books, but really good books that they think their kids would like reading. Some used books, puzzles, games, art supplies. They even had some acrylic yarns at the top of a shelf. It's clear they don't know anything about what to do with them, but they're trying to think of what people might want. No hooks or needles. So no, you don't go here for knitting. But if you want writing supplies, drawing supplies, quite good. Puzzles, quite good. I really liked Bookie Joint. It could be another something I really liked. After that, what did I do? I went into the t-shirt store next to it. I think it was called Not Another T-Shirt, and bought my souvenir t-shirts. And was very happy about that. I think there's a slightly better t-shirt place up on Main near Black Velvet, right next to Black Velvet. I don't remember its name, but I have to say I was happy at I think it was called Not Another T-Shirt. And I got my souvenir shirts for the boys, and got the magnet we put on the refrigerator for every place we visited. So that was really nice. I also got some beautiful postcards, which I added to my journal that night. Did I get anything else? No. Oh, I got some Aaron's Putty, which is a kind of therapy thing I learned about from Jasmine Knitmore. Thank you very much. And I'm coming into Red Rock Canyon, so I have to go up now and hate myself for not pulling out my camera because I need a restroom. Really have to come back here like next weekend and do this right with a camera. Really need to because it's so breathtaking. But southbound is good. Northbound is mind-blowing if you ever get to this place. Okay, so meanwhile, after that stopover, also that took me right next to the local Vaughn's supermarket. So if you need a supermarket, Vaughn's has Rebel ice cream, keto ice cream. I didn't get the chance, but I was happy to see it there. There was a bargain grocery outlet. They had like one container in strawberry. That's nice, but if you're going to blow your keto points on a pseudo-keto ice cream, really, get the chocolate. I'm just saying. Rebel's quite good, but it's not keto enough for me. And of course, once I start on a pint, I'm going to eat the whole thing, and that's enough carbs for like 3 days for me. But if you're going to have a pseudo-keto ice cream, as I said, in the meanwhile. So then I said, I really should go look at, there's a trail called, I think, the Lakes Basin Trail that runs right next to the Lake Mary Road. And it takes you by some of the most breathtaking views of the chain of lakes that's by Mammoth Lakes. So I decided to take the road because now the wind was rising and I was wearing a hat and gloves and thinking, Lordy, it's strangely cold for a day that's hitting 55 degrees. So I went down the Lake Mary Road watching the trail next to it. There's a beautiful pull-off at the head of the Twin Lakes, and I took advantage of that and took pictures of the Twin Lakes from what on the map looks like the northern edge. And then I drove down this little winding road, which was becoming surprisingly icy. And again, I didn't have chains or snow tires, so I was a little concerned. But I rode down that and I saw Mary Lake, which is just breathtaking and apparently wonderful for canoeing and kayaking in the summer and camping, and has rentals at the marina. And then I went past that to Mamie Lake, which is smaller but still a really, really spectacular place. Snow coming right down to the edge of the lake, and I started to say, there's snow here. And meanwhile, at the pullout for Twin Lakes, I watched these young people, very, very sweatered up, in a big SUV that was really rocking in the wind as they parked next to me. And I thought, oh, is my car rocking? Yes, it was. High windstorm. And the woman got out of the car and said, no way, it's just too cold. Now, of course, at this point, I'm wearing my heavy silk and wool and yak sweater, the Mad Skills Mammoth sweater. And I'm comfortable, but it is windy. And I'm wearing one of my hand-knit wool hats, I believe Black Moon Dog. Was it Black Moon Dog's yarn? I can't remember whose yarn it was. Beautiful hat I knitted, and fortunately was carrying in the car. And my fingerless mitts. And even I have to admit, my hands were getting cold, my face was a little cold. That hat was a blessing, let me tell you. Keep a hat in your car, kids. Anyway, so I began to realize it's getting strangely cold. So I did this beautiful tour, took all the pictures, and went back and landed at Black Velvet Cafe, which is Black Velvet Coffee House. And as I was drinking the delicious chai tea latte that I mentioned earlier, I looked at the weather because I wanted to put it in the journal, and then saw, does that say snow tonight? It wasn't supposed to do that. And then looked at the temperature, and instead of being 55, it was about 41, and said, oh no. And then just as I'm thinking this, I hear the barista saying to one of the locals who is wearing a Mammoth Ski Patrol puffy jacket, and he's clearly a local, and he's deeply, deeply suntanned, and I hear him say, oh yeah, we're getting ready for people getting stuck. And she said, well, with that big snowstorm coming tonight. And I'm like, what big snowstorm? Because up till that morning, the weather forecast was great. Sure enough, like 4 hours of snow predicted overnight. I ran back to the Ventura Inn, even though I'd prepaid for 2 nights. It was so cheap, I said, I can't afford to be stuck here tomorrow. And I threw everything higgledy-piggledy into the bags in all the wrong order, I got on Expedia and reserved a place at the Vagabond Inn because that was all I could get in Bishop. And I tore right at sunset. I tore out of Mammoth Lakes and went down the 395, and I landed in Bishop just before sunset. It was very strange because Bishop had been like 75 degrees that day. Whereas, up in Mammoth, I think it probably topped out at about 49. And it was so weird. Like, I got there and I immediately had to take off the Mad Skills Mammoth sweater because it was too hot. And I said, I can't believe this. And anyway, I ended up having a calm night in Bishop. And it really taught me, and I have to say, the owner of the Sierra Yarn Shop said this to me. She said, when you get to Mammoth, you need to take a deep breath and let yourself slow down. And I was really impressed. I thought, all of us crafty people, we all should be psychologists. I mean, she was reading me better than I was reading myself. And I got to Bishop and realized that the really fast exodus from Mammoth had left me a little bit juddering and shaking last night. But I settled down in bed and I knitted a little bit and I broke my rules and I paid for it. I actually was trying to figure out my next move and what I was going to do, and I stayed on the screens a little too late. I was sick as a dog all night. I don't know what it was because I didn't eat anything wrong. I realized I probably had a little too much caffeine, but it shouldn't have done this. And I realized that I think it's been like 5 nights of the 9 to 9 screens rule, and your body hates those screens is all I can say. That kind of wrecked my night last night. So I was listening to sleep stories all night long. Fortunately, I don't think there was anybody next door to me in the Vagabond Inn. And I didn't have to unload the whole car. I didn't take the Sherpa blanket up, which might have been a mistake, but I don't think so. But anyway, the hotel was kind of noisy from ambient noise. There was a clunking going on in the drain of the bathtub for half the night. It was very odd, but I still should have slept a lot better than I did. And I have to say, though, Vagabond Inn was okay. It was a reasonable price. It was like $102. And up there, resort prices, it was okay. And I, again, got their last room, I'm pretty sure. But I don't think they fill all their rooms on Sunday nights. I think they intentionally are not filling to capacity because of COVID. So anyway, I got up this morning and thought, I don't feel well. And my gut was really unsettled. I was a little unhappy. It's about 9:30, and I thought I could go over to the yarn store, to Sierra Cottons and Woolens, and I wanted to, and I thought, if by any chance I've picked up a bug, it would be unfair to do this to them. So I kind of regret it, but I didn't let myself go. As I record this, it's 12:27 in the afternoon, and I'm zooming across the Mojave Desert, heading for the town of Mojave. I can't be that far out of it, but it's very nice to be here. I'm glad to be home, but I regret not stopping at that wonderful LYS. I have to tell you, I did phone the owner and apologize because I told her I'd be back on Monday. So I phoned the store and apologized. I felt really bad about it, but I also felt like I'm not sure what's going on with my gut. I was unusually kind of sick last night. I think now it might be the altitude change as well, because I had a few bodily shifts when I was up in Mammoth yesterday. And it seems amazing. 48 hours ago, I was driving up. 24 hours ago, I was hiking. Actually, I was having lunch. At this point, I was down looking at the Mary Lake Road. I was in the bookie. Okay, anyway. The weird thing is, it all happened so fast. I really spent my time well in Mammoth. That's what really satisfies me, is not knowing that I was only going to be there for one day. I really got my licks in. And I'm so grateful that I went. There was just a huge part of me that needed to be out in nature and needed to see snow and needed to wear woolies and needed to breathe fresh air and needed to see beautiful mountains. So I did post the pictures on my social media, but I will also put it in the show. I'll put the pictures in the show notes. And it's almost like when I was in Switzerland, my friend and I traveling through Switzerland, we would be on the train sleeping, and one of us would wake up and say, "Is anything happening?" And the other one would say, "No, just another series of breathtaking mountain vistas. You can go back to sleep." That's what Mammoth Lake was like. The views are spectacular. The landscape is beautiful. No, I I didn't ski. I'm not a skier, but I'd love to cross country up there. I do cross country ski. I just don't downhill because I don't have depth perception. So downhill's kind of hard for me. But it was really nice. I would love to go back there in the summer and explore and camp. I'd love to see Devil's Post Pile, which you can't really go to at this time of year very easily. And there are restrictions because of COVID, even in the summer. But I'd like to go out to that. I'd like to see Rainbow Falls. I'd really like to hike in on the Lakes Basin Trail and some of the other trails, including the Mammoth Rock Trail. But I got a lot out of 24 hours in Mammoth. So I'm really happy about that, and I can't recommend it enough. COVID safety, people were very good. People were very good. There were one or two people, but it was pretty low-key. And I think like all the tourist places I've been to since the whole COVID thing started, they're very concerned about getting shut down as an epicenter. So they're very, very dutiful about the COVID precautions. So in the meantime, I'm just going to say, I hope this is episode 51. Hope it's good enough because I'm not doing it by the normal rules, so I haven't even started show notes, but hopefully I'll get those up by the time I mount this. So in the meantime, everybody, if you haven't gotten it yet, get your shot or your booster if you can. Wear your mask. Please wash your hands, epidemic or no epidemic. Socially distance. Did I forget anything? Remember, the little kids aren't vaccinated, guys. Remember when you're around kids. So please, respect quarantine and that sort of thing. But please, everybody, I hope I'm not forgetting something. Wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance, get your shot. No, I think that's everything. So please, everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.